Former Hard Living's gang leader Rashied Staggie has been shot and killed in Salt River in Cape Town. He was taken to hospital with wounds to his head and leg. Police have since confirmed that he was killed.
Staggie was sentenced to 15 years for and in 2003. He was released on parole in 2013 and had converted from Islam to Christianity. He reportedly motivated young people against gangsterism and he was shot and killed sitting in a car outside his home in Salt River last Friday.
The morning of Friday, December 13th, 2019, started like any other in Salt River, Cape Town. Rashied Staggie sat casually in his friend's Toyota Corolla parked outside his home. It was on this very street that his twin brother, Rashaad, had been down years before. What Rashied didn't know was that history was about to repeat itself and his time was running out. For decades, the Staggie brothers had built a criminal empire that stretched across Cape Town, becoming the third most powerful gang in the city. They were untouchable, feared, and respected. But in the underworld, no throne is secure forever. With power comes enemies, and the Staggies had made plenty. To law enforcement, they were public enemy number one. To rival gangs, they were obstacles to be eliminated. And on that December morning, as Rashied sat unaware in that sedan, the bloody finale to their story was about to unfold. This is the story of Rashied and Rashied Staggie. How the two brothers rose from nothing to control a criminal underworld, and how, one by one, they fell. Born in 1961 in Cape Town's Mooi-Rivier suburb, the Staggie twins entered a world that would give them nothing but take everything. When South Africa's brutal apartheid regime enforced the Group Areas Act, over 1 million colored and black. South Africans were uprooted from their homes. The Staggie family found themselves thrown into Manenberg, a hastily constructed township on the barren, windswept Cape Flats, where poverty wasn't just common, it was expected. In these concrete jungles, survival and crime walked hand in hand. For young boys with empty stomachs and no future, right and wrong quickly blurred, the twins found their way early. Rashaad, the troublemaker, started with petty theft and street hustling. Rashied, the quieter one, had a darkness in him that even the toughest criminals would one day fear. Rashaad was always getting into trouble, always stealing. Rashied, on the other hand, was silent but dangerous. As they grew, their roles became clear. Rashaad was the mastermind, handling money and strategy. Rashied was the enforcer, the one who carried out the violence. Together, they became unstoppable. One planning, the other executing, both feared. In 1971, when they were barely teenagers, the Staggie twins started the Hard Living's gang in Manenberg. What began as small-time crime on street corners quickly grew into something bigger and more dangerous. Under their leadership, the Hard Livings moved from petty theft to trafficking, robbery, and smuggling of guns. Their reputation spread fast as they clashed violently with rival gangs like the Americans and the Mongrels. The twins were smart and ruthless. They used their access to as a way to gain power, controlling people and territory through fear. Their biggest suppliers were corrupt police officers who would claim their were stolen only to secretly sell them to the gang. This shady deal gave the Hard Livings an advantage that most other gangs didn't have. Even though they were smaller than powerful gangs like the Americans, the Hard Livings ran things with military-like discipline. Their strict leadership allowed them to expand beyond drugs and guns, moving into protection rackets, extortion, prostitution, and even the taxi business. But drugs were their real money maker. It was the heart of their criminal empire. The Hard Livings gang had been around since the 1970s, but it wasn't until the 1990s that their name truly spread fear across South Africa. When people heard about the Staggie brothers on the news and hushed conversations on the streets, one thing was clear. They were powerful, violent, and willing to do whatever it took to rule the Cape Flats. By the mid-1990s, Cape Town was a pressure cooker. Crime was out of control, addiction was destroying communities, and the police seemed either powerless or corrupt. With no justice in sight, a new group rose up from the Cape Flats. People against gangsterism and or pagad. They were done asking for change. They were ready to take action. At first, pagad operated quietly, their protests barely making the news. But everything changed on the evening of August 4th, 1996, when they decided to confront the most feared gangsters in Cape Town, the Staggie brothers. That night, hundreds of pagad members marched through Salt River, their anger growing as they reached the Staggie home. They shouted for Rashied and Rashaad to come out and face them. But inside the house, only nervous voices responded from behind a locked door. Frustration boiled over. Suddenly, rang out. Pagad members the house, shattering windows and splintering wood. Then, as if scripted by fate, Rashied Staggie drove into the compound in his SUV. Instead of fleeing the scene, he drove straight into the crowd. The gang leader stepped out, facing the mob with a mocking smile. He taunted them, seemingly untouchable, even as hundreds called for his. A scuffle erupted. In the chaos, were fired. The crowd pulled back, revealing Rashaad standing alone, his expression shifting from arrogance to shock as spread across his shirt. More shots followed, and he collapsed into the gutter, his body twitching. Then, someone threw a petrol. It struck him, exploding into flames. What happened next became one of the most haunting images in South African history. Rashaad, burning alive, stood up. He walked, arms flailing, a human torch lighting up the night before falling to the ground for the last time. News cameras captured every second. The image of the burning gang leader became a symbol of Cape Town's violent reckoning, replayed endlessly on television and splashed across newspapers nationwide. Pagad's message was clear. The untouchables could be touched after all. With his twin gone, Rashied Staggie took sole control of the hard livings, but his reign would be short-lived. In 2003, he was convicted of orchestrating the gang of a 17-year-old girl who had dared to testify against him. The court sentenced him to 15 years for kidnapping and the following year, another 13 years were added for the Fowey police armory robbery. Prison changed Rashied, or so he claimed. He became a model inmate, earning early release on parole in 2013. He rebranded himself as a devout Christian, speaking at churches, attending community meetings, and promising he had left his criminal life behind. But the streets don't forget. Many believed his new image was just a cover. Behind the scenes, Rashied was allegedly still running his empire, perhaps even expanding it. Reports surfaced that he was fueling gang wars in Johannesburg, selling to rival groups, and supplying hitmen to keep the violence going. By keeping the war alive, he ensured that no gang became too powerful except his own. His religious connections proved surprisingly useful for his criminal enterprise. Local church and business groups allegedly helped launder profits, transforming money into legitimate-looking income. Meanwhile, the Hard Livings gang, once a model of criminal efficiency under the Staggie brothers, had begun to fracture. Internal power struggles, shifting alliances, and resentment over Rashied's perceived hypocrisy created dangerous instability within the organization he had helped build. On the morning of December 13, 2019, Rashied Staggie sat inside his friend's Toyota Corolla, parked outside his home in Salt River. Suddenly, two figures approached the car, shattered the morning silence, tore through the vehicle as the driver managed to escape, running for his life. Rashied wasn't so lucky. By the time he was rushed to Groote Schuur Hospital, he was already gone. At 58, the last of the Staggie brothers had fallen. His wasn't random. Just hours earlier, another high-ranking Hard Livings member, Bally Tips, had been down in Mitchell's plane. The message was clear. This was a coordinated hit. And in a cruel twist of fate, Rashied just meters away from where his brother had been burned alive decades earlier. In the end, Rashied Staggie's empire collapsed not because of police intervention or rival gangs alone, but because he tried to have it all: the respect of the community, the cover of religion, and the profits of crime. In Cape Town's underworld, such greed and deception could only end one way: with in the darkness and blood on the pavement of London Road. Initially, the gangs allowed Staggie to live as a civilian. They gave him leeway to a certain extent, but when he tried to operate in both domains, his was inevitable. The message was clear: genuine redemption might be respected, but pretending to reform while continuing to profit from crime was unforgivable. However, his double life wasn't the only reason he got. There were also some other theories about his death. The second theory traced back to the notorious 28s gang. Years before, when both Staggie brothers were alive, they had forged a powerful alliance with the 28s through organizations known as the Firm and Core. The Firm controlled the trade, while Core maintained a public face of community development. But this delicate balance had rested largely on Rashaad's diplomacy and connections. When he was in 1996, Rashied struggled to hold things together. Trust between the Hard Livings and the 28s started to fall apart. In the months before his rumors swirled that Rashied had secretly ordered hits on multiple 28s members. If that was true, he had sealed his own fate. The 28s are known for two things: they don't forget and they never forgive. They simply waited for the perfect moment. Another theory traces Rashied to foreign investors, specifically Nigerian traffickers. These powerful figures, drawn to his reputation in the Cape Town trade, allegedly handed him large sums of money to secure a foothold in the market. But instead of investing as promised, Rashied reportedly pocketed the cash. In the brutal world of international dealing, that kind of betrayal comes with only one punishment. When Rashied Staggie was down, many expected an all-out gang war, a wave of revenge that would drown Cape Town in but instead, the streets remained strangely quiet. And in a final twist, the Hard Livings didn't collapse. In fact, they grew even bigger. Today, the Hard Livings gang is the third largest in Cape Town, behind only the Americans and the 28s. They control 35 neighborhoods, stretching from the sandy areas of Strand to the crowded streets of Kryfontein and even the wealthy shores of Sea Point. Their influence is strong, but they are still smaller than their biggest rivals, the Americans, who dominate 73 areas like an occupying army. The numbers paint a clear picture. With around 6,040 members, the Hard Livings rank as the fourth largest gang in the city, behind the Americans, the prison-born 28s, and the feared Terrible Josters. Most of their members are concentrated in places like Monenberg, Mitchell's Plain, and Delft, areas where poverty and crime go hand in hand, and where young men, desperate for money and belonging, often turn to the gang for survival. In Cape Town's underworld, power isn't just about it's also about alliances. The Hard Livings have built strong ties with other gangs, including the Laughing Boys, Ghettos, Jesters, Junkie Funky Kids, and even their former enemies, the Mongrels. These connections give them access to more weapons and influence, with suppliers as far away as Johannesburg and Durban, keeping their criminal business running. As in life, the Staggie brothers remained a complex symbol of Cape Town's struggles, men who rose from poverty through violence, who built an empire on suffering, and who ultimately paid for their choices with their